and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be the 10-week sort of progress report of how my teacher bullet journal has been working out this year and how my system in general has kind of been working out. So I have pulled out my grade books to kind of show you, just because that is something that I don't keep in my teacher bullet journal, but for the most part we're just going to focus on how things are going in here. So let's take a look. As always, I will try and show you as much as I can, but there are going to be certain sections that I might have to cover up for privacy purposes. So yeah, let's just dive in. You guys remember I have kind of this dashboard on the front that is going well. I've actually refilled the sticky notes several times. It's nice just having them on hand. The front sections are kind of same old, same old. Things have actually, I could cross that out. I'm not going to do that yet. So the main thing is going to be, how have my monthly planning and my weekly planning sort of panned out? Did they go as planned? So monthly. I always start in August because that's when we have our sort of pre-back to school meetings for teachers. However, I don't bother filling in the rest of the month. I only do the sections for what I actually work on. So August is pretty light, but we've got September. So in September, I started out where, well, I go through my school calendar and I put in anything that I know of that needs to go on there. I put in student birthdays for the first couple of months usually. And then once I get my official schedule, I then will put in my classes. So I do color code my classes, and I do sort of a very truncated, I essentially use just a code so that I remember which classes I have on that day. I don't put the times that I have those classes because I have my weekly planning, but as I'm looking through, it gives me an idea. And for example, this was really handy this month, so here in November, because for example, my 11th graders were at their internships, and so then I just went through and I crossed this off. So when I set up my weekly, I knew, oh, I don't have to put my 11th graders on there because they're not here. So monthly has been going well, you know, definitely a couple of changes, but it's really nice having this general overview. We post the school calendar for like the next 2 weeks in the staff room, and so I always double check because sometimes dates or times change for meetings and such, but in general everything makes it in here so that I just don't forget about it. I have not filled up too much in the future ones. I've just got a couple of things over here, so that's just kind of going as is, but I do refer to my monthly fairly regularly. This section, my curriculum. Y'all, I have not been using this. I used it more last year, but this year I have not. And part of it is things just got away from me, and part of it is I've changed how I sort of plan my lessons overall. So let's take a look. So I have my pacing guide. I actually started writing in the first units. I have not picked colors, nor have I filled in the actual curriculum planning guide. I still think I would like to. I just have not yet done it. Ditto for high school. Yeah, just one of those things, I haven't had a chance to do it. I've got, you know, twice the number of classes, twice the number of students, and just time has kind of gotten away from me. So this is one of those things that if I can do it, I will. If not, it's probably not the end of the world because I do have other places where I have this information. It's just nice to see sort of an overall look at things. I have then my sections where I was planning on doing, you know, the name of the unit, the title, what they're going to do for their final project, any evaluations we're going to have, the different like vocabulary, grammar, and cultural things that we're going to learn, and documents I'm going to use. And you can tell I have not filled this in at all. So one of the reasons that I haven't filled this in is that I have been moving to a more digital method of planning to kind of reduce paper, because I realized at the end of last school year, when I had 3 full, like 3-inch binders for each of my 3 classes, that if I continue doing that every single year, I am going to look like I'm a hoarder. Like, I'm just gonna have so much paper. So I'm going to deal with the papers that I have accumulated a bit later, but for this year what I've started doing is I actually am using Google Drive, and I will do a video on how I lesson plan at some point, hopefully soon, to show you sort of how I'm actually organizing that. But the bottom line is I am trying to do as much as I can online on Google Drive so that it is then easily accessible at home, at school. I don't have to worry about updating my USB stick. I don't have to worry about updating things in here. It's easy enough to change things when I decide, oh, we're not going to do this anymore. I decide we're going to do this. So unfortunately, I think that this entire section that I've got laid out for curriculum are just going to be empty pages. I have still left them in case I decide to do something with them, and I don't know. But the thing is, if I have, for example, my 11th graders again next year, I'm going to take the things that I did in Google Drive and say, okay, what worked, what didn't, and I've got sort of the documents labeled and all of that kind of stuff, so it just seemed like double the work to then put it in here in like handwritten paper form. So for the moment, I am just kind of leaving this. I'm a little bit disappointed that it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, but I also, just with how much more work I have, having, you know, doubled the hours this year, I really was not about to create more work for myself just to make sure I filled in my teacher bullet journal. So kind of the way it goes. One of those things, you experiment. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I do have another tab here because I found out, and unfortunately I can't actually show you guys the information here, but I found out at the end of the summer that I was going to be essentially a homeroom teacher. It functions a little bit differently here in France than it does in the US or potentially in other countries. But I found out at the end, so I sort of like squeezed it at the back end of this section. And I essentially just have the information on who are the student delegates, the parent delegates, projects that we might do in class, my class's schedule so that I can see like who the teachers are and all of that kind of stuff. So that's just got some personal information, so I'll do that, but that was just at the end. And then we go into my weekly planning. So let me take off my clip here because obviously I've clipped all the weeks that we are done with. So weekly planning, you will know, you guys might remember that during the summer, I set up all of my weeklies, and I actually even went through and I've already labeled the weeks. So we have week 1A, 2B, 3A, etc., etc. So I actually already labeled those so I wouldn't get confused because I do have week A and week B classes this year. But essentially, this has been going really well. For the most part, I have enough space on my notes section. Most weeks I use up all of the space, but you know, typically I don't really need more space. It would be nice to have more space sometimes just to add in a couple of other things, but in general, you know, I have enough space to actually fill stuff in. I have, you know, my color coding that I've continued doing, so I have what the class is, the general thing that we're gonna do. For a while I was writing in room numbers at the beginning of the school year just so I wouldn't get lost essentially. I also have, so I use Google Slides in my classes because I like to give them their agenda, it has their homework and all of that kind of stuff. But unlike PowerPoint, Google Slides won't remember the last slide that you were on, and so I always had to find where I was in the whole like massive slides for that particular unit. So I started writing down what slide I was on. I've since stopped doing that just because it was too much effort. You'll see I have a couple of different things that are in like other general meetings that aren't for a specific class necessarily, are sometimes in there in black. Things that are important I'll sometimes do in red. I sometimes will color code my tasks based on the class. In general, I just do all of my notes and tasks in black pen just because it's easier. So this I use pretty religiously. I always have my weekly planner up to date. I will sometimes do, for example, we had our first, our like mid-trimester grades were due on the 5th, so I wrote that up at the top so I wouldn't forget. You know, things that come up, all of that. Honestly, like this is what I use the most out of this entire, out of my entire prof bujo, teacher bujo, whatever you want to call it. The weeklies are what I use the most. They are just very handy. I love having them. It just allows me to see, you know, when I have changes, when I need to move things around, when I have meetings, just, it's really good. I do tend to cross off, like check off when I finish those classes. I do also, let's see, so this was last week. Let's take, so here you see I had some color-coded tasks over here. So you'll see this week, for example, my 11th graders were on their internship, so I just had that up at the top. I had a task that was for one of my classes. Just, this is my like center for everything that I need to do. I do use my monthlies as I mentioned, but anything like detailed, anything that goes with the actual like times are on here. So this is actually this week. I do also, I've started trying to get about 2 weeks ahead set up in here so that I can start filling things in. So you'll see, you know, I have some meetings in the evenings. I've got penciled in things for what I think we're going to do in class so that when I sit down and plan, I already kind of have an idea of what we're doing. I do put down all of my classes up here to know whether or not I've prepped them so that I don't accidentally forget to do it, essentially. And yeah, so we've got a ton of meetings coming up, so I've just already set those up. I like to set up a little bit in advance. You'll see after 2 weeks, I basically have I've started doing the dates in here and I've put in different things, but I haven't like really set up the weekly. But this has been incredibly useful. I'm glad that I set up my weeklies this way. I think it was, even though it was a lot of work in the beginning to set it up, I really like and I really appreciate having the entire week laid out like this because it just helps me kind of keep track of time a little bit better. And if I ever need to change things around, I have the space to do it. So that has gone really, really well. Otherwise, the other section that I've used more than I thought I would, honestly, is my notes section. So, I have my notes section over here, and I've got a couple of sticky notes. I've got meeting notes. If you saw my teacher bullet journal set up from last year, I had like a discipline section for when I needed to give like detentions or what have you. So I actually just set up a page for each of my classes, and I have a couple classes where things have come up just so that I have a record of things that have happened, sort of thing. You can tell I don't use it very, very often, which is awesome. This I started using and have since stopped doing, you will notice. So I've got some various meeting notes, various things like that, kind of going through quickly because some of the information is important. But you see that I actually, like this one, for example, was a unit that I've been working on with my 11th grade honors class, and I'm going to I want to still do this unit next year, but I have to completely revamp how I'm doing it because I realized doing it this year that it just wasn't working the way I had hoped. So I've already started sort of brainstorming for next year. So I just put a little sticky note so I wouldn't lose this page of notes in there. I've got meeting notes, again, just all kinds of stuff. So I actually have used, I don't know, like half of this section maybe? Yeah, I've used about half of my notes section, which I'm really glad that I have it in here, and I was a little bit surprised that I've used it as much as I have. So I'm glad that I have this section in here as well. But yeah, that's kind of the way it's been going. Honestly, it's for the most part been working out. The only sections that are really not working out the only section that's really not working out the way that I had planned was my curriculum section. And like I said, I'll kind of get into this a little bit more whenever I do my How I Lesson Plan video, but the rest of it is working out well. I'm glad that I have the space to do the things that I need to do. I am not, you know, we're only a trimester into this particular school year, so I haven't yet figured out what I'm going to do for next year, but there are definitely some things that I'm already thinking like, okay, I'm gonna change how I do this next year or adapt this or what have you. But overall, the things that I kind of spent the most effort setting up this summer are the things that I use the most, which are my monthlies, my weeklies, and kind of the underdog favorite is my notes section. So I also wanted to really quickly show you in my Gradebooks how I've been setting things up. So I've got middle school, high school for attendance and homework, and then grades in here. So this is grades for all of them. And I did show you guys, I've got the washi tape on each section. So I have that, and I also have the color code in here. So I just know which classes are in which book. I also have, actually have some stuff to grade for one of my classes. I've also got the color-coded washi tapes on the edges over here. So let's take a look in, I've also got my tabs up at the top. This was so that I could easily get to the homework section. They're unfortunately getting a little bit crumpled, but this was just so I could easily flip to the homework section within each class. But let's take a look. Okay, so this is one of my shorter classes, so I can actually cover the student names pretty easily. So I've got the class labeled, and I've got the days that we have class, so for attendance. So I have a coded system in here where an A means the student was absent, an L means the student was late, and N means they forgot their notebook. This CG, we're reading the Canterville Ghost in this class, so the CG means they forgot their copy of their book. The 0 down at the bottom here means that there were no students absent, and you'll notice we had one student that was absent for a lot, so that has been, I haven't been able to fill that in. Yeah, so in this one, that's generally, I have, for example, in one of my other classes, we're reading a different book, so we're reading Fahrenheit 451, so if they forget their book, I do an F in here. Otherwise, I pretty much use the A for absent, L for late, N for notebook in all of my classes, so that I just kind of keep track, because this then goes into part of their, I call it the behavior grade, but it's really like, how responsible are they? Have they managed to show up with all of their materials? Have they managed to do their homework? That kind of stuff. So this just is something that I do so that I know, and also if I see if one kid's like really forgetful with things, try and figure out why. The next section I have is the homework section. So I have a homework section for all of my classes. I have also another way that I sort of code this information. So for example, true homework, things that I have said, okay, I'm going to check this. I have either an X means they did all of it, a 1/ means they did roughly half of it, and a dash means they did not do it. And I tend to circle the ones that aren't complete because, again, this goes into their behavior, but like, are they responsible grade? I also do actually, I have stamps that I do I have self-inking stamps and or stamp markers that I do. So I actually do go around and check their homework. Sometimes I'll collect it for a grade, at which point it usually will go in the grade book, but this just lets me know, who had their homework and who didn't, kind of thing. I do have some other ones. So for example, these don't actually have dates assigned to them because these were beginning of the year information. So I wanted their About Me survey. I had this text survey I wanted them to fill out, and I had a Flipgrid consent form that I needed their parents to sign. And so this doesn't actually count towards their like homework grade, for example, but it just lets me know who hasn't turned this in. And I have, one student that hasn't turned in 2 out of the 3 things yet. So that's just how I sort of organize it in my attendance and like homework section. I personally like to keep this information on paper. I just find it easier. I really like having this size notebook because then when I'm going around and checking homework in class or when I want to do attendance, it's small, portable, it's just easy for me to use. So this I actually really do like. I unfortunately have a number of extra pages at the end of actually both of my books. I have fewer in the high school section just because it was a smaller book in general. So I think next year, once I see how much space I actually use up, I think next year I might revisit how many pages I give to each section and that kind of stuff, but I do really like having this separate. The new thing that I did for this year was for my grades. Last year I actually did grades in my little small grade book, but this year because I have 7 classes, I wanted to give myself more space because I found that it was just very small for actually writing in that kind of grade information. So let's see, this is my shortest class. Oopsie daisy, so here we go. And I'm cutting off this side over here because I've got the student names again, so I don't have to cover that up. So this is, kind of the same setup. I've got the washi tape color code over here, the class name, and then I've got what the assignment is and the date. So for example, if the kids are absent, typically we don't have them make it up, especially if it's something that everyone else in the class has done and we've already given it back. Like, there's just kind of no point at that point because they could see what their friends did. I have essentially what the kid's grade is. Then down at the bottom, I make a note. How many points was it out of? What is the coefficient? So how much was it weighted? And then have I actually put it in the grade book? And then if I have any other notes, I add it down here. So for example, this was an assignment that was out of 5. This was essentially just a completion grade. So it's out of 5. It was a single coefficient. They had a writing that they had to do for me. This is the end of the trimester, so they've got their participation in their behavior grades, all that kind of stuff. On the right side over here is where I keep track of bonus. So for example, at the beginning of the year, they could do a Flipgrid video for me. It was optional, so obviously not all the kids did it, but if they did it, they got a bonus point. I also had an assignment that I gave that I had a couple go above and beyond, and so I gave them a half-point bonus on that. If I do, for example, spelling tests, which is something that I like to do periodically, they have the opportunity to earn a half-a-point bonus, so that would also go over here. So this way I kind of separate it out, and this is for the first trimester. So basically, now this is the end of the first trimester, which means that I'm just going to, flip the page, and I never actually labeled these. Most of my other ones are actually labeled with the trimester number. This one, for some reason, I didn't do this class, so this would be all of my trimester 2 information. I'm not sure, for example, if I'm going to transfer the bonus point information or just leave it on here and just kind of flip back until they've used it up. We'll see. But this is how I've set up all of my classes. Grades are on the left, bonuses on the right. I only am going to have one trimester's worth of information and then flip it so that I don't get confused between what goes to which trimester. Just makes it easier. So yeah, this has been working out really well as well. It's nice having kind of more space. So let me show you this one class. This is one of my bigger classes. So this is one where I actually have done, so a lot of the kids have used their bonus points, and so when I put it in the grade book, when they've done their bonus, I like to note that they actually use their bonus point. And for example, you see these two columns right here are super messy because it was actually something that I allowed them to do kind of corrections and then make up a couple of the points. So I've circled up at the top left corner, if they did the makeup, what was their original score? Then if they use their bonus points, I've added in the plus 0.5 or the +1 or whatever, and then the bigger number is then their new score. So it's nice having this extra space so that I can fill in all of this information, because I don't necessarily want to know, like, I want to know what was their original score. I allowed them to use the bonus points and that kind of stuff, but I need to know kind of what the original score was. So I want to keep that information. And last year when I was using the smaller gradebook, I just didn't have big enough squares to actually write that all in. So that is one of the reasons why I'm really glad I got this larger gradebook, even though it means I have essentially 3 notebooks I have to keep on hand for attendance, homework, and grades. So that is kind of the 10-week update of my teacher bullet journal. I hope that was helpful. Honestly, like, things have been going pretty well in terms of the organizational side of things. You know, anything else is kind of beside the point, but in terms of actually how I've been able to use the things that I set up this summer in order to keep my life organized, it's been going pretty well. This one curriculum section notwithstanding. So yeah, if you guys have any comments or questions, let me know down in the comments section. I will try and get my how I lesson plan video up in the nearest future. So if you have any questions about that, you can drop them down there and I can try and include them. Otherwise, that is all I have for you guys for today. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye. Hey guys, so if you've made it all the way to the end of this video and are actually watching my end screen and you're not subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate it if you would. There's a little button right there for you to do it. And if you're interested in watching some more of my videos, I have links to 2 of my older videos off to the left there, so you can check those out if you would like to, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.